Tonight we're going to be studying Hebrew. It's going to be a bit different than most of our evenings. We're going to be learning Hebrew taught by my dad. I think it's going to be really special. I'm really looking forward to tonight. As we go there, I want to ask everyone a question. Make sure that you respond in the chat box, not the Q&A box, the chat box, and make sure that you're not just messaging panelists, but panelists and all attendees. Why don't you tell us if there's any language, ancient or modern, in any part of the world that you could just learn so easily, what language would that be? Let us know what language it would be for you. I know someone's going to say Elvish from Lord of the Rings. I feel you. I think for me, it's Biblical Hebrew, which is one of the reasons I'm so excited for tonight. As you know, more than half the Bible is written in Hebrew, and it is such a sacred and special thing to be able to read the Bible in its original languages. So in a moment, I'm going to call out my dad, but first we're going to open in prayer. Would you join me in prayer? Heavenly Father, thank you for your steadfast love, for your chesed. Thank you that you are more fiercely committed to your children than anything we can ever understand. But I pray that in a fresh way this evening and this week, you would help us to be able to comprehend with believers from around the world and throughout history how wide and how deep and how steadfast your love is, and how we can count on your character. I pray that even as we dive into something different tonight, as we do language more than differently than kind of content we spend most weeks on, that you would meet with us in a special way, and that you would bless us as my dad leads us in learning Hebrew. In Yeshua, Jesus' name, amen. Well, we're so glad you're here. And now please give a warm digital welcome to my dad, Alan Gilman.
Thanks, Daniel. It's good to be back with you. As always, appreciate Daniel's opening and keep those languages coming in. You don't have to say Biblical Hebrew as if that's the right answer. Though I gave you everybody advance warning. I don't know if some people are going to take this week off. It's great to see so many people signing on again. As we do, as Daniel said, something a little different as we do what I called a taste of Hebrew. And it's going to be a taste. You're not going to become Hebrew experts as a result of this session. But if you don't know any Hebrew, then you're going to be learning infinitely more than you ever have. So I hope that you're going to enjoy this and that you're going to find it helpful to some extent. And like usual, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box. I want to encourage you, if there's anything from the course that we've already done, anything from the Seder that you haven't had a chance to mention or share, comment or question, or any of the other sessions from before this one, please feel free to share your question there. I think this session is going to be a little more relaxed than the previous ones. As you know, I've packed a lot into each session. I think this is going to be a little more not so rushed. I think that's it at this point. Yeah, and next week, of course, we're going to be getting back into the actual survey by looking at the prophetic books. We're going to do an introduction to the prophetic books before we're actually going to look at each one of the 17 books of the prophets in the Old Testament the week after next. Anyway, so you'll see as we go along. So let me bring up the screen here. All right, so we are at session 12, which I have called A Taste of Hebrew. So let's look at what our objectives are for this evening. Sorry, I felt like I'm gonna give you the Jeopardy categories, but that's not exactly what we're gonna do. So these are the session objectives. First of all, you are not going to be able to read and write biblical Hebrew by the time the next hour is over. I hope that doesn't disappoint you. This is, as I said, you can see it there, a taste of Hebrew. It's like going to Costco and getting a sample, maybe even more than that. I think it's more than a Costco sample. Oh, they don't do that anymore because of COVID. I'm so sorry. I hope I didn't trigger anybody because of that. I miss them too. Okay, so you will increase familiarity and appreciation of biblical Hebrew by the time we're done. I'm pretty confident. Increase respect for the work of translators and scholars. Very often when we get a Bible, this is an English Standard Version. We have it in our hand. There it is. We tend to take this for granted, and can sometimes wonder why are certain translations different. A lot of work has gone to this, and for the English Bible, I shared this early on in the course when I talked about is the English Bible the Word of God, and I believe we could say yes. Centuries. Everyone says literally today, but literally centuries have gone in to what we have in our hands or online today as we read the Bible, and it's the result of so much work by so many people over such a long time. You will be able to use online biblical Hebrew tools. If we have time, I'm going to show you one of my favorites, and just to show you how you can look up biblical Hebrew words. And when I say able, that might be an overstatement. This is a little, I'll give you a little introduction. And because, and I think I remember now why I wrote this point, once you have this bit of familiarity, then you're ready to actually recognize words and interact with those words. And so now you can use some of the tools that are available. And there are some good ones, free. There's some good free online ones that are easy to access. One of the objectives is maybe some of you will decide to pursue the study of biblical Hebrew. And so you would go on from here to do further study. And it does take a while to master it. Takes even longer to become familiar with it and so on. But every bit you learn, as long as you learn with humility and don't automatically think you're an expert because you can read the word shalom in the Bible, or somehow you could read the first verse, which we're going to be looking at more than once tonight. That doesn't make you an expert, but I probably didn't need to tell you that. So let's get into it. First of all, the Hebrew that we have in our texts today, if you bought a Hebrew Bible, and we're going to see a sample of a page of a printed Hebrew Bible, the letters that are used, I'm going to use the pointer here. There we go. So these letters here in this far left column, let's call them squarish. These are actually borrowed from ancient Aramaic. When the Jewish people went into Babylon, last week we talked about the scattering of the northern kingdom by the Assyrians and then the exile of the southern kingdom by the Babylonians. The Jewish people went to Babylon, not only for the 70 years, after 70 years they were able to come back, but most of the Jewish people stayed. So during that time, the alphabet changed. It went from the one here I'm showing you in the second column. This is when we say original Hebrew. For all we know, there's a more original one that no one's ever seen as the letters developed over time. But prior to the change over to the familiar letters, which are Chaldean or Babylonian, was this earlier alphabet they called Paleo-Hebrew, and it looks more like Phoenician. And I couldn't find one, but I've seen it in the past. There are some inscriptions you can find, scrolls that are written mainly with the, let's call it the modern as of the return from Babylon, modern, several hundred years before Yeshua came. There are scrolls that have these squarish characters, but then God's name is still written in Paleo-Hebrew. And that kind of thing where we treat God's name in this special way, people have been doing that for a long, long time. And so here is a scroll, and I'll try to magnify it for you. There we go. So this is a scroll written in Paleo-Hebrew. This is the, as far as we know, the original Hebrew script as opposed to the one that is used today. And so let's look at that. Here is a scroll, and I'm not doing a magnification of this picture. It's a different one, but this is, we call this scroll text. Again, I'll make it bigger for you. So if you were in a synagogue and you had a chance to see the text of a scroll, it looks like this. It's the squarish letters. It has its own style. See these little crown. I can't point and magnify it at the same time. But if you look at the second line, you see several letters have these little crown type things on top of them. That's a common occurrence in scroll text. And if you have any familiarity with Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, you might notice something's missing. And those are the dots, dashes, and squiggles that we find in the printed text. Here again, magnified for you a little better. So this is printed Hebrew. I actually took this picture today from a printed Hebrew Bible. This particular one had English on the side, and the main part of the page has the Hebrew. And we're going to talk about the dots and dashes and curvy lines as we go along. But that is the difference between the scroll text and the printed text. Has to do with how the words are pronounced. And with the scroll text, you need to understand that just by reading the letters. And I'm going to explain how this all works in a few moments. So today in modern Hebrew, if you would get a book, a novel, or the newspaper, it doesn't have the dots and dashes. It looks more like, well, it's going to have the more squarish look than the, let me see here, than this, more squarish than this. This has the fact that this one is probably done by hand is seen here, while the other one, this one is typesetted, probably typesetted in when this particular book was printed. So books for children will have the dots and dashes, and printed Bibles do, but not newspapers and regular Hebrew books. That has to do with modern Hebrew. I just wanted to show you this. This is Hebrew script. So when people write Hebrew today, and for a long time, they don't write with the squarish text. Let's see if I can magnify this here. So there's the letters that, and again, it's too bad I can't point and magnify at the same time. So you could see here, not very well, but you can see, come on, be nice to me. There we go. Okay, so here where it says the name of the letter, which we'll look at, and then it has the printed letter underneath, is we call this the cursive form. I know a lot of kids today aren't learning cursive the way all of us did, and when you look at some of our handwriting, you wonder if some of us ever really did learn cursive. But it's very common in languages that you have a printed variety and a handwritten variety, not the calligraphy type, because calligraphy is handwriting too, right? It's fancier. But if you're just going to write it out, so if somebody actually wrote a letter today in Hebrew, they would be using these letters. And I'm going from right to left because that's how Hebrew works. And some of them are very close to the printed form, and some of them are quite different from the printed form. But this is the way it is. And I have the link here. Remember, you're going to get these slides afterwards, so you'll be able to look up any of these things. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at, where are we here? So some Hebrew-English differences. Some of these will be familiar to you. Some of them are likely going to be new. So first of all, as I already mentioned, Hebrew compared to English reads from right to left. So this is Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And in Hebrew, we read it this way. And remember, that English is the language that's written backwards. If we're going to think of any of them as backwards, English is backwards because it's newer. Hebrew is older. And there are other languages. There's languages that read up to down, sort of thing. And so Hebrew is read from right to left, and the books look like you open them from the back, because the back is the front. And so this is Bereshit bara Elohim et Hashemayim ve'et haaretz, read from right to left, as opposed to English, which you already know goes the other way. Second difference, and there's more differences than this, but I'm giving you a taste. This is all about a taste of Hebrew, remember? So another difference is that Hebrew uses what we call a consonantal alphabet. The alphabet has no vowels. So it would be as if, so Hebrew is written as if we were writing English like this. And I'll give you a moment to see if you could read this sentence. This is English without the vowels. What does this say? Time's up. It says the dog chased the cat. So when we look here and we see here the CT at the end, and of course, TH, nothing else, probably can only be the, and there's two of them. This middle one, CHSD, I would assume a lot of people would get this pretty quickly. But DG and CT, this could be dug, dig, this could be caught, cut. But it isn't that, I don't think it's that difficult based on the context to figure out that what the words really are in this sentence. And so the presence of some words make it easier to know the other words. And of course, something like, back when Hebrew was originally written, it's not as if people were sending texts to each other. They weren't reading the Jerusalem Post back in David's day. So writing wasn't as common. Most of the writing that people were exposed to were the scriptures. Most people would not have a copy. Only more learned people would have it, and that would be what they would be reading. They wouldn't have all these various books, so it wouldn't take that long to have it all memorized. And so the consonants almost become like reminders of what the words are, as opposed to, what's this word? What's this word? You wouldn't need it as much as we might need it in English. And so let's look at Genesis 1:1 again. So here it is without any vowels in it. So this is how this verse would be read in a scroll text. And again, as I mentioned, modern Hebrew in a newspaper, this is how, if they printed this first verse of the Bible, this is how they would likely print it. And so this is the way it'd be written in scroll or in modern Hebrew. In a printed text, you would see it with these dots and dashes, which I will explain, as I said, we would do. So this is our second Hebrew-English difference, consonantal alphabet. Next one, it's heavily conjugated. Now, conjugated, if any of you, the reason why I need to mention this, there's no shame if English is the only language you've ever learned. And some of us, maybe we took a little bit of, in Canada, almost everybody's taken at least one French course. Almost everybody. There's maybe people who haven't. In the United States, Spanish is very popular as a second language. Where you might be from, you might already know 5 languages. And you know about some of the things I'm sharing with you, they're not going to seem strange. But if the only language you ever had was English, we don't conjugate in English as much. So when we say, I could have written this down, but I didn't. So, I could show it to you in this next slide where I show you the Hebrew conjugation. So let's look at the English first. So here's an example of conjugating a verb in Hebrew. It's the verb kept. And if you're familiar with French, in French, when you talk about the main word, it's the infinitive. So it would be to keep. In French, we'd start with to keep, and then you talk about how the verb is conjugated. In Hebrew, we start with what's called the third person singular perfect, which is like the past tense. So that's why we have he kept, and it's kept, not kept I kept this for myself. It's kept like a shepherd keeps his sheep, watched over, in other words. So in English, let's just look at the English for a moment. So we have he kept, she kept, no difference. You kept masculine, you kept feminine, English, same thing. And it's the same. Kept, 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 kept. I kept. They kept. I have y'all for the plural you, which in English we don't differentiate anymore. In the King James, they did. There was you singular, ye plural, and we lost that. I'm sad that we lost that because it's helpful. And so what people have done in some places, of course, in the South, they have y'all, and I've been told because some of my kids have lived in the South that in some places they'll even talk to one person and call them y'all. So what do you do when you have many people? They'll go all y'all. It's something in language that we do, and there's parts of it, particularly I think in southwestern Ontario, good like 7-8 hours from here, you have people they'll say use, like use guys, but most of us simply use you singular or plural. That's the same. And so, but the interesting part is that you singular in English and you plural in English is the same. And we kept, it's all the same. So in some English words like run, no, not run, run's not a good one, hit. So I hit, you hit, he hits, she hits. So now we add an S. But these differences in with English verbs are, there are not a lot of them. Hebrew's not alone, where it seems like there's hardly two that are alike. None of these are alike here. So we have, so I'll just read them over. You've got the English there. So for sake of time, we've got shamar, shamra, shamarta, shamarat, shamarti, shamru, shamarate, shamarten, and shamarnu. All different depending if it's masculine, feminine, singular, plural, first person I. There's I singular, and we is called first person plural, and then the two kinds of yous. There's a plural use for you. So, and you can see each one of these depending whether it's who it's about and whether it's singular or plural, it affects the verb itself. So I just tried to explain how Hebrew is heavily conjugated. Well, that's not all. It also has a heavy use of prefixes and suffixes. A prefix is something stuck on at the beginning of a word. You've heard of the Antichrist. So Christ is the noun, and because Antichrist it's one word, anti is a prefix. And I don't know why that was the first one that came to mind. You could do a Freud thing with me to see what that's about. And suffixes. Suffixes are things that put at the end of words. We use them in some verbal forms, like so. You have so running. The ing is, we call that it's a type of a suffix, and English uses them, but not like Hebrew has. And that suffix explanation may not have been the best, but anyway. So prefixes are things stuck on the beginning of a word. Suffixes are stuck on at the end of the word, still part of the one word. And Hebrew uses them greatly. Now, I know you do not know Hebrew yet, but let's just look at a couple here. This is Genesis 12, verse 3. This is, I will bless those who bless you, and him who dishonors you I will curse, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. You're going to have to trust me a lot, I guess, in this session, more than usual. And so here, this is the first word. Remember, we read from right to left. And so we have va'avaracha. And the first bit is a suffix. It's the word for and. And the word and, it could also mean things like when and however and but sometimes. It's the letter vav, and it's very, very common at the beginning of sentences, but it doesn't stand by itself. This is not a very technical way to say it. It's stuck on to the beginning of the word. And so here, so this is, and I will bless those who bless you. And so here, mevarechecha, the cha is the bless you. In English, we don't do that. They're separate words. Who bless you? Here, the who bless you is all part of one word. Now, if you're already kind of like, what? How am I ever going to deal with a language that does something like that? Well, from my understanding, real ancient Hebrew didn't even have the spaces between the words. Ancient Greek had the same thing. It would just run on, and you would learn to know the beginnings and endings of words just by understanding the words. So be grateful for these marvelous spaces in between the words. Next difference. Pronouns tend to be implied. So here, Genesis 3:10, this is the verse where we read, and he, meaning God, said, that's Adam speaking, and he said, I heard the sound of you in the garden. The you is God. I heard the sound of you in the garden. I was afraid because I was naked and hid myself. And so here, it's where it says, and he said, this is, I could have really worked on memorizing this, so it doesn't always roll off my tongue. This is vayomer, and he said. There's no pronoun for he as a separate word. It's implied by the verbal form. And we have the prefix for the and, then we have the verbal part, yomer, and he said. And so it's just in the word, and because we just looked at, I could go back here, when we looked at, because it's so heavily conjugated, unlike English, where it's kept. It doesn't matter who we're talking about. But in Hebrew, because each different form of the verb has to do with the implied pronoun, if it's he or she or you and we. Okay. So pronouns tend to be implied. No indefinite article. The indefinite article in English is a. The definite article is the. So there's a the in Hebrew, but there's no a. So this is the first part of Deuteronomy 8, verse 7. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land. A good land. So here, it could have said, bring you into the good land. But if it said that, it would be talking about that land over there. But this is emphasizing that land over there is a good land. There could be other good lands, and the promised land is a good land, like other good lands. So it's indefinite. It's not pointing indefinite. It's not pointing at something in particular. It's a kind of something. And so, but there is no in Hebrew. It doesn't exist. It's implied. So it's here we have el aretz tova, to land good. But of course, they're not thinking that. They're not. It's only if you try to translate in this kind of weird literal way. People want to give me a literal translation, and things don't. Languages don't work that way, because languages work in particular ways. So there's a concept of indefiniteness that exists in Hebrew, but in English, we sometimes drop the indefinite article, but we often use it. And so it was right for the translator to translate this as into a good land, because that's how this would be understood. And remember, I'm not trying to teach you biblical Hebrew so that you know biblical Hebrew. I'm trying to give you enough orientation to basically, you're trying the Hebrew waters, or a taste of Hebrew, as I've called it. Okay, Hebrew, as opposed to English, stresses the ultimate or penultimate syllable. Here's Genesis 1:1 again. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And I'm going to be explaining a little bit about how we know where the syllables are stressed. But what this fancy language means, the ultimate is the last syllable, and the penultimate is the second to last syllable. I know people in English use penultimate to mean the greatest ultimate. Like there's the ultimate and there's the more ultimate. Ultimate means the last. Penultimate is the one before the last. And so when we read biblical Hebrew and modern Hebrew, it would read, I have the this stress marks here on each word is showing us what I've just explained, that every one of these words in Genesis 1:1 is either stressed on the last syllable or the second to last syllable. So it's Bereshit, bara, Elohim, et hashamayim, ve'et haaretz. Now, English actually stresses, and listen to how I'm talking, how I am talking, English stresses the first syllable a lot, not all the time, but so many, now I'm listening to it as I'm talking, so many English words are stressed on the first syllable. And so this gets tricky when you're dealing with a Hebrew word that has more than two syllables. So we have a daughter, her name's Devorah. That's the Hebrew, that's the English derivative Devorah is Deborah. So that's why a lot of people will call her Devorah, because of the tendency in English to stress the first syllable as opposed to the second to last or last one. And so Hebrew has this rhythm that is a lot more da-da-bum, 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 as opposed to dumpa, dumpa, dumpa that English has. And it's something to be aware of. Now, of course, if you can get obsessed about this, especially with some two-syllable words, and end up stressing, like, is it melech? That's king, or melech? So you would need to know that. But one thing you will always know, if there's more than two syllables, it's the first syllable will never be stressed. Sometimes I'm stressed. Okay, next one. Time is derived from context. So past, present, and future, I don't have a verse for this. Past, present, and future, let me put it this way. In English, we talk about tenses. It's all about past, present, and future. We're very, very time-oriented in the English language. And I wish I knew a lot more about this than I do. Hebrew tenses are more about the kind of action going on as opposed to whether it was past, present, or future. And this, again, this is a huge difference. And we're getting into the very psychology of the language. And this is, again, like, we should be very grateful to good translators, because this is the kind of thing that they have to deal with, and the chasm that they have to cross to get from an ancient language like Hebrew into English. And by the way, modern Hebrew in many ways actually thinks a lot like Indo-European languages like French and English. And the way it uses modern Hebrew uses tense is not the same as ancient Hebrew. That's why a modern Hebrew speaker also, who's, if they haven't studied biblical Hebrew, they can read the words. That's not a problem because of the way the Hebrew alphabet and the vowels work. They can read the words. Many of the words are going to be familiar, but there are some ancient biblical words that aren't used in modern Hebrew. But also how the language thinks is different. That's why, I don't know if they've completed it yet, but there's been a project to translate ancient Hebrew into modern Hebrew. Now, it's interesting, I've been told the gap between Old English, which goes way before Shakespeare, these and thous don't make it Old English. So the gap between Old English, and I don't know if that's 1200 or before that, to modern English is actually much wider than the gap between ancient Hebrew and modern Hebrew. There's still a gap, and especially in the psychology of the language. That's why be careful if you have an Israeli friend and they're telling you things, what the Bible says. They're not actually necessarily, now they might be skilled in biblical Hebrew. That's great if they are. But if they're just operating from modern Hebrew, that doesn't mean they're a biblical Hebrew expert. So do be careful of that. So time is derived from context. And often, ancient Hebrew, I don't know what modern Hebrew does with this. Maybe somebody else knows. Ancient Hebrew often leaves out the present for to be. So here, it's a long verse. This is 2 Samuel 9:4. In English, it is, the king said to him, where is he? And Ziba said to the king, he is in the house of Machir, the son of Amiel, at Lo Debar. I should say Lo Devar, at least, because that's Hebrew. So here we have, I want to look at in the house. So here, it's interesting because the pronoun is used here. This says hine, behold, which often in modern English versions isn't translated. It's a mark, notice this, behold, look it. So hine hu beit machir. So I was trying to think of a way to tell you this. So the Hebrew word for he, in English he, in Hebrew is who. The English word for she in Hebrew, the English she, the Hebrew is he. And the Hebrew for the English word who is me. Now, this won't be on the test. There aren't any tests. They're not going to give you a test. So, starting with Hebrew first. Me is who. No, so do it. He is who is he, and me is who. And it's those of you who know Abbott Costello and have the famous old a comedy duo, and the famous "Who's on first?" Who, me. I would love to do a Hebrew lesson a la Abbott Costello because of me is who and he is she and he is she and who is he. There. So this is who. Who's on first? So who bet machir? He, if literal, he house makir. So this is who bait or who bait is this is he is in the house. So in modern Hebrew, so if I was going to say I am in the house, I say ani babayit. Literally, I in the house. But remember, they're not thinking that way. That is how you say I am in the house. So in English, the present tense of to be, I am, he is always explicitly written. In Hebrew, it's often left out. Whew. Next one. Different word order. This is not about the fact that it goes from right to left. So if you are familiar with other languages, French has that where the adjective of something, the description of a noun often comes after the noun instead of before. In English, it's always big brown bear. That's how we do it in English. We put all the modifiers of the noun before it. But in Hebrew, they could be all over the place. I'm not going to take the time. This is the same verse as the last one. I'm not going to read it, but just take my my word for it. And the verb, as I mentioned here, the verb is most often at the beginning. So if literally this says, and he said to him, and he said to him, Hamelech. I better say this more clearly. So literally this beginning phrase is, and he said to him, the king. The king is actually the subject. That's in English, it's the king said to him. And so the order is different. So this is one of the things you'd have to learn if you actually start to study biblical Hebrew. So to sum up the Hebrew-English differences, reads from right to left, consonantal alphabet, heavily conjugated, heavy use of prefixes and suffixes, pronouns tend to be implied, no definite article, stresses ultimate or penultimate syllable, time is derived from context, often leaves out present to be, and different word order, with the verb often being at the beginning. So really different, and I'm sure there's other differences if I took time to provide a more exhaustive list. But let's remember, God in his providence revealed himself through this language. Now, I don't want to turn Hebrew into something like the heavenly language or the greatest language. It's just, this is the language that God chose to primarily reveal himself through. Now, you might want to jump in and say, but there's also first century Greek. It's called Koine Greek. It's this particular kind of Greek of the first century, and it's a Jewish influenced Greek, but even more than that. And going back to this statement about Hebrew, and it's really sad because much of scholarship for much of history has often so focused on the Greek of the New Testament and have neglected that the writers of the New Testament, most of them were not they were not Greek speakers as their first language. It was not their mother tongue. It was their language in their home was either Aramaic or Hebrew, and their first languages of learning, except for Luke most likely, was Hebrew. And their expression of biblical truth and all the context in which they're deriving what they're speaking of, called spiritually or theologically, is all rooted in Hebrew Bible concepts. And much of the New Testament are quotes or allusions to the Hebrew Bible. Sometimes they're using the Greek Septuagint, which I've mentioned before. That's the first Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. Sometimes they're doing their own Greek translations of the Hebrew. And so it would, in studying the New Testament, and again, this has not often been done, we should be looking at the words of the Greek words in the Septuagint and see what Hebrew word underlies that Greek word. And so the Hebrew language is actually the roots of the entire Bible. And so whether we're doing the work or we're reading books that of scholars who understand this, we need to try one way or another to get back to the original. And hopefully our translations, our good English translations, have done that. But of course, in our study, we want to do better than that. So understanding even just a little bit of Hebrew is better than nothing. Unless you think you're an expert after this session, that is a problem. Okay, so now let's go on to the Hebrew Alefbeit. The Hebrew alphabet. Alefbeit, the first two letters of the Hebrew alphabet, as we'd say in English. So I've recommended, I know some of you, how do I know? Maybe all of you downloaded the handouts. I don't know how well you could see it here in here. But I suggested that you have them, and you could use these handouts, and I'm going to explain the alphabet and the vowels in a moment, and you could start with this to help you read Hebrew words. And I'm giving you a little taste of this, so this is going to get you started off. And on the handout of the alphabet itself, as opposed to the vowels, at the bottom there's a couple of links where you can hear me read the alphabet and sing it to the tune of Yankee Doodle. I didn't make it up, but it works. It works pretty well. So let's look at the alphabet. So the first letter is Aleph, and it is one of the two silent letters. I'm going to explain how the silent letters work. And before I go on with this, I do want to say that the pronunciation that I'm using is what's become the most popular current way to pronounce Hebrew. And even not that long ago, there were other ways, and there are older ways, and we don't know what type of Hebrew Moses spoke, because there's ways of speaking and accents, and these things change over time. There's theories about very ancient Hebrew. After the session, you might want to look up on YouTube look up Yemenite Hebrew. People say the people of Yemen, the Jewish people that were living in Yemen near Saudi Arabia, that they preserved the most authentic Hebrew pronunciation. The current pronunciation is basically how Hebrew is pronounced in Israel today. And it's actually lost some of the differences in how some of the letters are pronounced. And also some of the letters have different pronunciations to that same letter. And some of those differences have been preserved and some of them have been dropped. I'm giving you the most popular modern way to pronounce it. I'm going to mention some of the differences as we go along, and for a good reason, as you'll see. So, okay, so there's two silent letters, and actually they're not originally silent. They're guttural letters. Like the original Aleph was something more along the and the other one I'll get to in a moment, and I don't pronounce it properly. You can look that up online. But currently, Aleph, as well as the other silent letter, is like the H in the word honest. It's almost like it's not there, but it does have a bit of a honest to it. So that's how the silent letters are pronounced. Not totally silent, but just about. Okay, let's continue. Many of the letters could have dots in them. When you're reading in the Hebrew Bible, you'll see various letters with dots. I'm sharing with you those that in current pronunciation makes a difference in how we say it. So the second letter is either beit or veit, beit with the dot, veit without the dot. It's like the b in boy, the v in vine. Gimel is a g, like in good. Dalet, like d, as in day. Hey, like the H in hot. Then the vav, very, very, very common as a prefix. We saw it originally. It's translated as and, but it could stand for other words as well. So today we pronounce it vav, like a V, as in vine. But it wasn't that long ago. And there are still people who don't pronounce the vav as a vav, but as a wow, with a w sound. So the name David, so there is a v, the b can sometimes be a v, that's the beit or veit, but the vav used to be, and very clearly it used to be a wow, or a wow, pronounced more like that. And so the name David, David, was actually Dawid, which is much like the Arabic. The Arabic has retained that the w sound that Hebrew eventually lost, except for a few groups that still use it. Next letter is Zion. And I should have said that Hebrew is phonetic. So if you learn the name of the letter, so you learn that Yankee Doodle version of the song, Alefbeit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zion. Once you've learned the letters, you could recognize which one's which, then you could basically read. Once you also learn the vowels, of course, but at least you can get all the consonant sounds just by learning the names of the letters. Next one, chet, then which is a ch, like in Bach, tet, a T sound, yud, the smallest letter, a y sound. Then we have kaf or chaf, very similar to the chet if there's no dot. And it's one of the letters that has a final form. There's a few letters that when it's at the end of the word, it looks a little different. So the little bottom of this letter drops out when it's in the final form. Next, we have lamed, L sound, l, mem, m, as in mom, it has a final form. One of the issues people have with Hebrew is differentiating some of the letters. Until you get used to them, some of them look a lot alike. Then we have nun. It has a final form. Nun, a n, like in now. Samek, an S sound, like in sit. Then there's ayin. And ayin, I was told a long time ago, it had a sound like a camel grunt. So it's a deeper guttural sound originally, like ayin, something like that. But today's simply silent like the H in honest. Then we have the pay or the fey. It might be a little hard to see. I'll magnify that. Pay or fey. Pay with the dot. Fey without the dot. Has a final form. The bottom drops away again. Then we have letter quite different from any English letter. Tzadet with a tsa, 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 like tzadet. I have it in the English like the word hits. It has a final form. Then we have kof. It's a k sound. Often when it's transliterated, you'll see a Q to differentiate it from the kaf, which is more of a K. So but it's still, we pronounce it with a k sound, like in king. Then there's the reish, and you'll hear people pronounce it with a rolling R, or in the back of the throat, like the French r. And a lot of people will simply do an R without the roll, but it really should have the roll to it. Then we have the shin and the sin, and that depends. I'll magnify that one too here. So the shin has the dot on the right, and the sin has the dot on the left. And so one way to memorize this is sin is never right. If it's on the right, it's shin. And the final letter is ta. Oops, sorry about that. The final letter is tav, another T sound. And this letter, sometimes you see Hebrew words. There's a famous organization, B'nai B'rith. Now we would say B'nai Brit, but the tav without the dot had a th sound, but now dot, no doubt, it's a t. And then some Jews, like from where my wife and I come from in our heritage in Eastern Europe, Ashkenazi Jews, the pronunciation of a final tav was s. So maybe you've heard of, so circumcision, it's a bris, it's from the word covenant. So we would say Brit today. B'nai Brith, it was one of the pronunciations, and then bris. So some Orthodox Jews would refer to Shabbat, the Sabbath, as Shabbos with an S at the end. And these are some of the differences. But in modern pronunciation, the tav, with or without the dot, is a t sound. Now, I don't expect you that now you know the alphabet. That's why I've encouraged you, download the handout. It's all there for you. And give it some time, sing the Yankee Doodle song. You're going to learn the alphabet. Now let's look at the vowels. Now this is different from English, very much so. These are the dots and the dashes. I explained to you way back when we did the session on I talked about Biblical Hebrew in the is the English Bible the Word of God. How, as I've already mentioned, Hebrew was originally a consonantal language. You understood the vowels just by tradition, by passing it on, by learning it. Eventually, there was fear that the pronunciation would be lost. There was this group called a scribal group called the Masoretes, and they came up with the system of dots and dashes that are used today. And so we'll go over them. And I'm really surprised how late it's already gotten. So we'll see how much of this we can cover. So I'll make that decision as we go along. So here we go. So let's magnify this. I'm not too sure how well you could see it. There, that's better. All right, so we're going to go from right to left. So this single line under a letter, that's an ah sound. And then the thing that's like a little T under the letter is also an ah sound. If you study Biblical Hebrew, there's actually some differences, but we could pronounce them the same. So this is ba, and then if there's a yud after this vowel, it becomes an I sound. So this would be bai, ba, bai. Oops, magnify. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. Then we have the 3 dots or the 2 dots. Again, they can be differentiated, but they can be pronounced the same way. And it's an S sound. Be, be. And then we have be if it's followed by a yud. Then the single dot is an I. If there's a yud after it, it's an E. So this is bi, the first one, and then on the left here, B. We're almost done the vowels. And again, there's a handout for this. The dot over, so in the sheen, it's different. That can be a little confusing. The sheen differentiates between a sh and a s, but usually a dot over any other letter makes an o sound. Now this vowel is a little difficult for most English speakers to learn because we tend to round our O's. So I have here the word boat, and that's how a lot of us would say boat. We close our lips over the O. But actually, as a modern Hebrew teacher taught me once, I don't know how well you could see this, but the O is like being hit on the head, and you go, oh, oh. So it's bo, not bo. It's not bo, it's bo. That's why it's shalom, not shalom, shalom. And also the vav can have a dot over it. It's not a v or a w anymore. It becomes a vowel, and it's the same sound. Also an o. Does this work? No. Then we have the three dots, and this is an u, like boo. That says boo. And this is the same. So if the dot is in the middle of the vav, it becomes a vowel, and it's boo. Then this is really important. The 2 dots straight up and down under a letter, and it could sometimes be joined by one of the other vowels, but if there's 2 dots, it's a half vowel. It's also called a schwa or a shva, and it's almost non-existent. It's almost like an apostrophe if we want to transliterate it. That's why. So like you don't say Yeshua, it's Yeshua. And so in many three or more syllable words, you will get an initial shwa or shva, where it's, so I mentioned my daughter's name Devora, so it's not a de, it's not Devora, it's Devora. So it's there, but not very strong at all. It could also be at the end of a syllable and not be pronounced at all. That's an extra. You won't have to worry about that. All right. So now using vowels with silent letters. So we were looking at a consonant, the b, the bait. So b, b, boo. But if it's a silent letter, it just makes the sound of the vowel. Again, it has this bit of a gutturalness to it, like the H in honest. So these two words this is av, father, and people. So that's how. So this would be an as opposed to a ba or a pa or a sha. Okay, so it's of and So for the sake of time, I had some made up words. We're going to go over those really quickly, but I'm going to skip those. Let me just take a look here quickly and see. Let's go to some names. So this is an introduction to some names. We looked at this one already. So remember, we don't actually pronounce this. I'm going to get rid of my laser pointer if I can. We don't actually pronounce this. This is that we looked at this. People tried to pronounce it. We say Adonai, but this is God's name. It's Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, with the vowels based on the word Adonai. Then we have, this is Adam, Adam, and it's related to dam, blood, and it's related to Adamah, ground. Remember, Adam was taken from the ground. These words are all related, as well as the word for red, Adam. Oh, sorry, Adom. Well, close to Adam is Hava. That's Eve. Then we have Avram. In English, they do Abram. I don't know why this happened with English. I wish they would English translations would use something closer to the Hebrew. So here is Avram. This is Avraham. Avram's name was changed to Avraham. This is Sarai, which is what Sarah's name was before. I've heard people try to pronounce it Sarai, but that's not. In English, they're trying to represent it as Sarai, and her name was changed to Sarah. Sarah. See, this is the scene because the dot is on the left, and the two vowels. So this is a sin, a resh, and when the hey is at the end, usually it's not pronounced at all. And that's why the English name Sarah has an H at the end, because of the final hey. This is Yitzchak, comes from to laugh or to mock. It's Isaac. So here's the shva or shua, the two dots. In this case, it's just marking the end of a syllable. Yitzchak. This is Rivka, where we get Rebecca from. Rivka. I probably should use the pointer. That would be better. There we go. This is Yaakov, Jacob. You could pronounce it slowly, Yaakov, Yaakov. This should be pretty silent though, Yaakov. That's why you get Yaakov. Yisrael, Israel, Yisrael. Comes from prevailer, striven with God and with man, has prevailed. Rachel, Rachel. So the CH that you often see in some Bible words, Bible names, represent often the chet. It should be a ch sound. Then we have Leah. Yosef is Joseph. Moshe, Moses. This is one of my favorites. Aharon. I like because you could say Aharon. It's Aaron. That's why there's the two A's at the beginning, and that gets lost. I know some people say Aaron, some say Aaron, but it's from Aharon. A lot of Hebrew speakers speak lower than us English speakers. This is Yehoshua, Joshua, and the short form is Yeshua, where we get Yeshua, which becomes Jesus through an interesting turn of linguistic events. Now we're going to look at an important thing about Hebrew, biblical Hebrew. I'm not going to take that much longer, and that is what's called cantillation. Cantillation has to do with how the text is sung, and I'm gonna have to make sure. I don't know how this is done, so I might have made a mistake. I'm gonna stop the share for a moment and start it again. There we go. All right. Okay, so what we have here, if I have it here, come on. So this is Genesis 1:1 again. This is without the vowels. I showed you that at the beginning. That's how you would see it in a scroll text. Then I showed you a printed text, and this gives us the vowels. That's how most of us would know. Once we learned the consonants and the vowels, we would know to read Bereshit, bara, Elohim, et hashamayim, ve'et haaretz. The consonants and the vowels. But these aren't all the markings. Let's go back here. This is just the consonants. There's another set of markings when you see a printed text of biblical Hebrew. And they're these ones. And they're more curvy type lines. These are the cantillation marks. These are the markings that were part of the Masoretic tradition. They didn't just provide the vowels. They also marked how the text was to be chanted. And one of the beauties of the chanting marks is they also provide us with the punctuation. It helps us to know how the words connect. And the two main ones is we get the ending thing. It looks like a colon. That's the period in Hebrew. This is where the sentence ends. And then the bit that looks like a wishbone, that's the half stop. It acts like a comma or a semicolon in the sentence. And so here we have both the vowels and the cantillation marks. And I'm going to now share, hopefully it'll work. I'm going to share with you the chanting of this verse based on these markings. So here we go.
Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz.
That wasn't me. And so the text is always sung. And a professor of mine years ago, I mentioned it before, Bruce Walke, said that there was a good chance that when the Masoretes wrote down this code for the vowels and the chanting, that really represented a very, very ancient tradition, and that the singing of the text in some cases might even been original, that the biblical text was always meant to be sung. And I'm going to quickly look because I do want to wrap up. It is after 8 o'clock my time here. And so I think I will leave it at that, except to go to the end. I just want to look at a few more things and then we will stop and take your questions. So what I was, and you're going to see this, not, you're going to see this too. You're going to get the slides, right? You can download the slides. I have a section of, I call it important biblical Hebrew words and verses that they're from. And so you could see what they are. The pronunciations are not provided. So you're going to have to get out your handout and decipher using the alphabet and the vowels. You'll have to decipher the text. You could also find pronunciations of the text online if you want to hear it either sung or read. You could find all that. So this is one of the most key of all the statements in the entire Bible. Remember, in the Gospel of Mark, when Yeshua is asked what the greatest commandment is, he begins with this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And in synagogue services, this is sung, and I thought I would sing it for you. And it goes like this: Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. The next one I wanted to look at is taken from Psalm 121, verse 4. This verse is Hine lo yanum v'lo yishan shomer Yisrael. In English, it is, behold, he who keeps Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. And that statement is an expression of who our God really is. And of course, God doesn't sleep, but it means that he's continually looking over his people. And what he has promised to do for Israel, he's promised to all who have put their trust in his son, the Messiah. And so this is the transliterated version, because I am going to try to sing it for you. And you probably notice I have my guitar back here, so I'm going to get it. This is actually one of my favorite biblical Hebrew songs. It is so beautiful, and I hope I'm able to do it justice for you. Hine lo yanum velo, hine lo yanum velo yishan, lo yanum velo yishan. Yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. Hine lo yanum velo yishan, lo yanum velo yishan. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. So why don't you try it? For some of you, no one's watching. Hine lo yanum velo yishan, lo yanum velo yishan. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. This next one we did for during the Seder at the end. This is Psalm 133, verse 1. Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brothers and sisters to dwell together in unity. And this is a grand miracle that we experience by putting our trust in the Messiah. And here I have a slide that has the transliteration under each word. Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad. And to make it easier for you, here it is. I'm going to have to change some slides as we go. I think this will work. I don't know why I do commentary while I'm talking. So here we go. Two versions, the slow version and the one that gets faster. Hine matovu manaim shevet achim gam ya. I'm going to start again. I changed the I'm doing a different key, a better key than I usually do. Hine matovu manaim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manaim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanaim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov umanayim yachad. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. La 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 la. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. La 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 la. Hine ma tov u'manayim. Sorry, try it again. Hine ma tov u'manayim. Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov u'manayim. Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. La 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 la. Hine ma tov, hine ma tov. La 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 la. Okay, so I have a couple of things for further study, and then I'll be taking your questions. All right, so I highly recommend this book. It's not cheap. It's a pretty big book. It's theological word book of the Old Testament, and that's exactly what it is. So it has all the major words from the Hebrew Bible, and it's explained like a dictionary. And it's a great reference book to see what particular Hebrew words mean. Now, then there's this. This is Hebrew for the Rest of Us by Lee Fields. There's a Greek version by another author. And it would be a next step that these two books, the Hebrew one and the Greek one, are written for people who want to understand how the biblical languages work without actually learning the language. Now, that sounds like you're just going to read some concepts, but actually it's pretty thorough in dealing with the alphabet and the vowels and how it's read and how the structures work. It's not. I wouldn't call this elementary. This book, but it would be a next step. The other way to go, if you're interested in studying Hebrew, and I don't have a recommendation offhand for you, is to do a first level biblical Hebrew grammar. Okay, and so where we're going to go next is here. This is number 6, verse 24 to 26, very familiar to many people. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, which is in Hebrew. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ye'er Adonai panav alecha v'chuneka, Yisa Adonai panav alecha v'yasem lecha shalom. And may the power of these words be imparted to all of you, wherever you are today. And with that, we'll go to the question time.
Well, Dad, thank you so much. I join everyone around the world tuning in to say thank you, not only for teaching us, but for singing to us and over us. The first question, and I want to invite people to ask questions. We're not going to have a ton of time for questions today. At least on my end, I'm going to have to go pretty close to the 8:30 mark. I know some weeks we've gone to go a bit over, but tonight I'm going to have to sign out about at 8:30. But we do have some time for questions, so please pour in your questions right now. Dad, I just have a quick question. When Jesus said the line that you quoted to us in Hebrew, would he most likely have gone into song at that moment?
I doubt it. Yeah.
Okay. Doesn't matter that much. I just thought.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I could see how one could conclude that, and it's still theory whether it was always. Like, did the prophets stand out in the marketplace and chanted out? That would be amazing if they did, or did they speak it? We don't know.
Okay. Well, for the sake of time, we'll jump to Lori's question. Lori says, Hebrew often leaves out the verb to be, you said. Is there an explanation as to why Yahweh is called I am? I don't mean this to be disrespectful. I prefer to use the existing one rather than I am.
I don't think there's a connection between the lack of the verb to be and God's name. It's the verb to be exists in Hebrew. It's connected to the word for life, and that's what God's name was based on, and that's why the existing one is a good representation. In French, I mentioned this. They use l'éternel, the eternal one. It's like the being. It's the same kind of idea. But yeah, the leaving out. We got to be very careful. There's a temptation when we learn little interesting things about Hebrew to make to derive implications that may not be there. And one of the things I didn't mention because we didn't have time to look at that aspect of Hebrew is Hebrew's based on relatively few root words, and so the word for word, speak, is, and all the verbs and all the rest that have to is all related to the one word devar. And I've heard there's about only 600 roots in Hebrew, and all the other words are derived from these few roots. I wish I had more examples. I believe, like in Hebrew, if instead of, we would do like the thunder sounded, or whatever we say about the thunder rumbled. In Hebrew, you would have the thunder thundered. But it also, Hebrew, because of these roots, Hebrew is also very concrete language. It's very picturesque language. It's very down-to-earth language. And I think that's very helpful in what God has given to us. It needs a much longer explanation, but I'll just leave it at that for now.
Great. Dad, I asked this on one of the first weeks, and because you're teaching us a little bit of Hebrew tonight, I think it's worth bringing up again, which is most, if not all of us, have sat there in church and had someone from the pulpit say, I know your translations say this, but this is a better, or this is what it also means. Or a lot of us have used Blue Letter Bible perhaps in our own sermon prep and found some interesting insights about a word and the way that the nuances. Can you speak to us? Is that ever legit? Is it always, is it dangerous to have guys? A lot of pastors might have taken some classes in Hebrew, but they're certainly not experts enough to correct the translators. What are your thoughts?
Study of Bible is always a journey into better understanding. And a lot of the reason for better understanding has to do with how our understanding of things tend to get additional layers put on top of it. So, for example, the Hebrew word and the Greek words for salvation mean rescue. Salvation sounds very spiritual. It's, the saving of souls, when actually, and in fact, there's in the Greek, you have Yeshua healing someone, but the word is he saved them. It's that idea that he rescued them from that infirmity. And so it's a study like that is, I think, is very, very legit, which salvation is supposed to mean rescue. But when it starts to take on a flavor, a sense that is starting to move away from the intention in the actual writing, it's helpful to go back to some of the things and provide these kinds of explanations. We do need to be careful with, the verb is like this, and if you did it literally, it'd be like that, and therefore it means this, and all the other translations, they do it differently, even though it's obvious that literally it's this. Well, there could be a very good reason why the translators tend to go a certain way. And it has to do with how not only Hebrew, but languages work. And it's only when you really understand the language that you understand those nuances. So that's why our translations tend to be very good. The problem with any translation is you're never going to capture in the target language, so English is the target language from the original Hebrew, you're never going to capture the target language, the fullness of the layers of the meaning in the original. It can't be done. That's why at some point very popular was the Amplified Bible, because it provided a little more than just the one derived word in the target language to represent the one word in the Hebrew. Since we're on this topic, there's one thing thing that's important. You mentioned the Blue Letter Bible. If there was time, I was going to demonstrate how to look at the Hebrew in the Blue Letter Bible. And it's a website. You can look it up, Blue Letter Bible. And if you go to the verses and tools, you'll see the interlinear, and you could see the Hebrew or the Greek. Be very, very careful. What's very common among people getting serious about Bible study is a thing called word studies. A word study is you pick a word like salvation, and which is Yeshua in Hebrew, and you look at all the places where it's found, and you begin to categorize how it's used in different places. Well, then often what happens is people will take a way it's understood in one place and then read it in to another place. And that's not how languages in general work. Meaning is always derived from context. So be very careful not to read in something from one context into another context. That is, if you start doing these word studies. Word studies are helpful, but be careful. Like your verse, that maybe you're going to be speaking on something and it's a verse, and it's possible that the nuance or the meaning of the word in that verse could be different from all the other places it's found. So be careful.
Yeah. Thanks, Dad. That's really helpful. There's a follow-up question from Debbie on the Theological Word Book. She says, does the Theological Word Book go into the deeper meanings of words? For example, echad in the Lord is one. Does it define a word in depth, or rather than just translate it as one?
They're actually, I'm sorry, I don't have a sample for you, which you probably, if you go to Amazon especially, and .com is better than .ca, a lot of the books have samples. So actually, if you even typed Theological Word Book, the Old Testament sample, you might find a sample page, and so then Debbie, you can see it right there. And they're a little bit more like, when I say encyclopedia articles, they're explanatory. So you'll get a list of different forms of that one word, and then there'll be paragraphs explaining the different usages of the word and where the various key places where they occur. They don't provide you with all the verses they occur, but there are paragraphs. There it is, right there.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay, next question from Keith. He says, why was bait used at the beginning of Genesis and not Aleph?
Oh, I think you could probably look up some rabbi or somebody who tries to derive something from that. I think it's bait because Bereshit is the first word, which in English is in the beginning, and it's just spelling. I don't think there's any extra significance to that. Okay, and I will take this time to give you my position. I'm very leery about things like Bible codes. Sometimes there could be words that represent numbers, because like Roman numerals, Hebrew letters can be used as numbers. There could be times where that could occur, where something's implied in a bit of a cryptic way, but generally speaking, going with the plain sense and the profound, there's depth in Scripture in understanding it, but I'd be very careful from trying to find hidden meanings and decipher the code and this sort of thing. And you'll get Genesis chapter 1, every third letter, and they'll try to find things. And I think I'd be very careful, because when you start doing that and finding patterns, very often that could be quite more forced than we might think it is. And then we could start making the Bible say things that God did not intend to say through the Bible. So be careful.
Thanks, Dad. So many questions I want to ask myself, but I'm going to go with questions people are asking themselves. Linda says, please expand / define the Hebrew word for soul. And she writes it out, but I actually don't know how to.
Nefesh.
That's it.
Yeah. There's a really good Bible Project video. If you haven't, I haven't seen all the Bible Project videos. Go to YouTube, look up Bible Project. They're terrific. They're so well done. Daniel's smirking a little bit. He likes them too.
I love them.
I haven't yet. Be careful, because what happened? We're not. What's the word? Endorsing all of them. I like their general perspective, and they have one on nefesh. Nefesh means life, and so the a lot of people like to expound upon the differences between soul and spirit and this sort of thing, but it soul just means the life of the person, and I don't think there's anything really more to it than that. And there's a pretty good Bible Project video on that particular one.
Yeah, and I want to clarify that is there a difference between a smirk and a grin with delight? I definitely grin with delight over the Bible Project. It's so helpful, in my opinion. Okay, Ted or Marg ask, day in Genesis, 24 hour?
Yeah. So day, the word for day is yom, and we have the list of day one. It's a first day, a second day, a third day. Is what it says. The that it uses the word yom in and of itself does not comment on whether or not it's 24 hours. Certainly, it's Genesis 1 is written like a normal week. And now I know some people say, well, the word yom, because you could, biyom is in the day, like at the time of. It doesn't mean 24 hours in that case. So just the use of the word itself doesn't necessarily make it 24 hours. It's around the Ten Commandments that there's a stronger case for the 6 24-hour days, because it says, just as the Lord created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh, so you shall rest on the seventh day. But again, you're not going to find a definitive answer. You're not going to resolve the controversy with the Hebrew word yom by itself.
Thanks, Dad. Dawn says, talk about punctuation in biblical Hebrew.
Yeah, so the little bit that I know is what I shared concerning the cantillation markings, that they are so the way the text is sung is preserving the phrases. And this becomes an issue so you'll get a Bible translation, a commentary that will relate words to each other, adjectives, stop a sentence in a certain place, and all the rest. So in some translations, they have less respect for the Masoretic tradition, and some translations have more respect for the Masoretic tradition. I do not believe the Masoretic tradition is perfect. I prefer to start with it, and then when it might be problematic, I mean, that's the work of people that did this, and so it's likely they're preserving the phrases. So how the modifiers, adjectives, adverbs are working, where the sentences break, where the midpoint of the sentence breaks. But the original text just runs on. That's all we have. And there was an oral tradition. And so there may have been more than one oral tradition. There might be differences. So the Masoretic tradition is very good, but it may not be perfect. And so, the scholars will deal with that. And that might help you more in understanding, if you're reading a commentary, why they're saying what they're saying.
Thank you. Just as we wrap up, maybe this is a little off base. I'm just going to ask it anyway, Father, as our last question. But we've had, so in Islam, the Quran, people will say the Quran can only be read in Arabic. And if someone's reading a translation, not really reading the Quran. Can you comment on how the Bible is different?
Yeah, so I tried to cover that in that session, is the English Bible the Word of God, and tried to demonstrate that, well, one of the things we even see in Scripture is we have words that are already translated. So when Pharaoh is speaking, he's not speaking Hebrew, right? He's speaking Egyptian, but we have it in Hebrew. And so we have things like when the people come back from captivity and the Torah is being read to them for the first time in a long time, when under Ezra, the priest, and there were people stationed among the crowd translating the Hebrew into Aramaic because they didn't understand the Hebrew anymore. And that was fine. In the New Testament, translates. It's the Gospels are all written in Greek. There's a tradition that Matthew was originally written in Hebrew, but we have translations of people speaking Aramaic and Hebrew, and using translation, using the Septuagint, and so on. And so the idea that we can take the words and represent their intentions in another language is seen to be legitimate.
Sweet.
And also, let's not think that, let's say we have some real Hebrew experts, some of the best in the world, and they're studying the Bible together. Does that automatically mean that they're getting the essence of the words better than some elderly man or woman who's in their 90s who've read the Bible through every year since they were 12? It's possible that the English reader who is so saturated in a good translation all those years might capture the essence more than the Hebrew experts. And of course, we don't have any commandment of God that says thou must read this in Hebrew.
Well, thanks, Dad. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Next week, we're going to be getting into an introduction to the prophets. It's going to be really good. I'm going to be there. I look forward to seeing you there as well. Have an amazing evening. We're praying God's blessings on you, that God would speak to you richly and profoundly through his word, and that by his grace, we could apply it to our lives, building our lives upon the rock that is the word of God. So have a great night, and God bless.